Sugar actually works on the same centers in the brain as cocaine and nicotine.
I'm Jill Angelo, host of the Geneve podcast series for women's health in midlife. I speak with the most forward-thinking experts in the health and wellness industries. These experts are helping women 40 plus feel confident and in control of their health in the most vibrant years of their lives. So join us on this journey of women's health. As I'm recording this, it's the day before Halloween and the start of the sugar season. For the next 2 months, many of us will be surrounded by sugar. From baked treats at work to parties to gifts of holiday goodies, sweet temptation is everywhere. I asked Dr. Anna Garrett to talk to us about how bad sugar truly is for us and what we mean when we say it's addictive. Listen up for some great tips on how to kick your sugar habit. I'm excited to have Dr. Anna back, this time to talk to us about sugar and sugar addiction. And, I think the first thing I want to ask you about is we hear this word addiction after sugar. And is it really an addiction, or how do you think about it?
Here's how it works. When we eat a lot of food that contains sugar, a massive amount of dopamine gets released into our brain. And dopamine, as you are probably aware, is that hormone that neurotransmitter that gives us that feel-good feeling. And when we keep doing it, it requires more and more sugar to give us the same amount of dopamine because the receptors get downregulated. And so that means the effect of the foods gets blunted and we just have to keep consuming more and more. And sugar actually works on the same centers in the brain as cocaine and nicotine. So we know those are highly addictive. And so if we are thinking about it, then it makes perfect sense that sugar would be addictive.
It's interesting how there's always kind of a demon in our food, whether it's fats or trans fats or sugar. Do you see this as, around the notion of giving up sugar as a fad or as a thing that's going to stick around for a while?
So I actually did a little background research on this because I was just curious to kind of see how it all rolled out. So fat got all the blame from the 60s on as far as being a bad thing for your health. And while trans fats are bad and they can contribute to heart attacks, what came out was that in 2016, researchers unearthed this big scandal that the sugar industry had sponsored fake Harvard research in the 1960s. So the sugar lobby basically paid these Harvard researchers to take the heat off of sugar's health effects and turn it more toward fat. So this quote-unquote research concluded that there was no doubt that the only dietary intervention to prevent heart disease was to eat less cholesterol and polyunsaturated fat. So we know that that's not true because in 2014, researchers were able to scientifically show that eating too much sugar could really increase your risk of dying from cardiovascular disease. So the statistic for that is that people who are getting 17 to 21% of their calories from sugar have an additional 38% higher risk of dying from cardiovascular disease compared to people who get just 8% of their calories from sugar. So that, I had not seen all these statistics, but if you think about it, 20% of your daily calories might be, 240 calories from sugar. Wow. If you're eating a 1,200 calorie diet, which many women do, despite the fact that that's a bad idea, but that's a whole nother podcast.
So let's key in on women. Is this sugar thing a real problem, like an extra problem in midlife? Because obviously you're tying sugar to cardiac health, but even hormonal health. Like, is there a linkage between all of them?
Absolutely. So we know that sugar gives us highs and lows in our mood and energy, and that's just sort of from the normal spikes in blood sugar and then the big drops that it causes. But what that does is it disrupts insulin, and insulin is very intimately linked with estrogen, testosterone, and cortisol, which are the three big players in midlife women's hormones. Changes in insulin can lead to a decrease in sex hormone binding globulin, And sex hormone binding globulin is the protein that sucks up extra estrogen and testosterone in the body. So when it is too low, it actually releases more estrogen into a woman's body, which just exacerbates the whole estrogen dominance issue. So it actually makes that balance of estrogen to progesterone worse. And, as we both know, that is not a happy situation for most women in midlife because it causes irritability and anxiety and insomnia and weight gain and all the things that we all complain about all the time.
There's a higher rate of cardiac health problems with women as well. Is this also a culprit associated with that?
Well, yes, because, as I mentioned with the sugar research, if you're eating a lot of sugar, then your cardiovascular risk goes up. So you have that, and then you add on to that lower estrogen levels, which also contribute to increased cardiovascular risk. So that's why when they were looking at estrogen replacement studies, cardiovascular disease was one of the outcomes that they were looking at as to whether estrogen actually benefited that or not, and we know that it does. So you're actually adding two problems on top of each other. So yes, it would compound that problem.
Okay. Well, I think the verdict then is cut sugar. So let's go there. If I'm ready to give it up and do I go cold turkey, or how do you kind of advise your patients, and clients to start to cut it out of their regimen?
Boy, that's a really tricky question, and that is a very hotly debated topic. My personal opinion is that going cold turkey, even though it's difficult, is probably the way to go, because if you can make it through that first week, you're pretty much golden. And this is especially true if sugar is what I call an avalanche food for you. So it basically kicks off binge eating. It's kind of like, oh, well, I'll just have one line of cocaine instead of 4. It's sort of that approach to things. So I'm a fan of going cold turkey. Now, you will read things that say, well, you should just try to cut back. And if that's the way to go, then that may be the low-hanging fruit. So the best place to start when it comes to that, I think, is with any drinks that have sugar in them, because that's the easiest place to pinpoint something.
All right. And those drinks are?
Well, in the South, sweet tea, sodas of all descriptions. Those are the two, putting coffee in your sugar, that kind of stuff.
How about any drinks, because obviously drinking sugar is kind of, like you said, the first way to start to cut that out. Any non-obvious ones? Where might it surprise us?
Well, a lot of foods are going to contain naturally occurring sugars like milk. I mean, you can't really do a whole lot about that. So I'm talking about any drinks where sugar is added. Any drink that had agave added to it, perhaps, or, rice syrup. Anything that says syrup on it is probably a sugar. So, when you talk about hidden sources, that's one thing to think about. I think wine and sweetened drinks are probably the biggest things that you could look at as far as beverages go.
So drinking our sugars is one culprit. What other kind of foods do you see it lurking within?
Well, the way I teach my clients is if they're reading a label and there is a substance on there that ends in OSE, it is a sugar. And so you would definitely want to see that down near the bottom of the list of ingredients, because ingredients are listed from most occurring to least occurring. So OSE substances, not good. And then maltodextrin is another sugar disguise. So those are the most common ones. And then we talked about agave syrup and rice syrup and all of those syrups that get put into things.
Yeah. How about artificial sweeteners?
Oh, don't get me started. So artificial sweeteners are about 100 times sweeter than sugar. And so what happens is your brain senses that amount of sweetness, and it believes that there are calories coming to match that sweetness. And, most artificially sweetened drinks especially don't have any calories in them. So there's that mismatch in your brain about what it's sensing and what is actually coming into your body. And so what that does is leave you wide open for cravings and a quick run to the vending machine that's closest to you.
Fascinating. So your brain is like, okay, you promised me some calories and you didn't deliver, so I'm going to really amp up my desire in you so that you can't turn me down. Wow. Okay. God, the drama that goes on in our heads.
Exactly. So, I mean, what I would say, if you're going to drink drinks that have artificial sweeteners in it, do it with some food that has a lot of fat and protein in it, because that actually helps blunt that craving.
So let's talk about like kind of withdrawal, and if there is one, and then how I love that you went to the combination factor, like combinations of foods that we can kind of use to blunt that or to drive it down. So start with withdrawal. Do we go through it?
Yes, most definitely. So the things that you're most likely to experience would be low energy, headaches, and cravings. And these tend to peak around day 3 to 4, and then it starts to get a little bit better. And like I said, if you can make it through that first week, you're pretty much on your way. Now, having said that, I had a client recently who 2 weeks into it, she was like, yeah, I'm still having these cravings. And that's where the food bit of it comes in. So I am a firm believer in the approach of making sure that you're eating healthy fat and protein to make sure that your body stays satisfied longer. There's also a supplement called L-glutamine that's really helpful for aborting cravings. So it's an amino acid, and you can open the capsule and sprinkle it on your tongue, and it goes straight to your brain and pretty much takes care of things. Or you can take it routinely 3 times a day, and the same thing will happen. And as a bonus, it's good for gut healing. So you get 2 things in one.
Maybe walk us through, like, what does the first week feel like versus second versus third? Like, when does it become like, I feel so fantastic, I can't even go back?
Well, my experience has been that most people within 7 to 10 days, as long as they're like going cold turkey, and that means cutting out things like pasta and bread and those carbohydrate things that you would not maybe think about, but that do turn to sugar. So your diet really should, in the beginning, focus on protein and low starch veggies. And so what that means is green leafy veggies, things like beets and potatoes and sweet potatoes all turn to sugar as well. So those would not be great choices in the first week of this. So, I don't eat a lot of sugar, so I've never actually done a sugar detox. But my understanding from people who have is that they are just singing the praises of this choice that they've made within a week to a week and a half, because their energy level is so much better. They're sleeping better. They're more alert. Their skin looks clearer. I mean, their inflammation is better. There's just so many benefits to doing it, because sugar is really inflammatory for most people.
So let's talk about your diet. You said you don't consume very much sugar. What do you eat?
I eat a lot of fish. I eat a lot of lean protein. I love green leafy vegetables better than anything on earth. If I'm going to eat a starchy sort of thing, it's usually quinoa. I do eat sweet potatoes. I don't eat pasta, and I don't substitute gluten-free things for the things that have gluten, because I think that's as bad for your blood sugar pretty much as just eating the real thing. So I really focus on veggies and lean meats. I eat a lot of eggs.
Those are all good things. Like, they sound great, It doesn't sound like you're depriving yourself. So then as a person takes sugar down, is there a point at which they can kind of start to reintroduce like a sweet potato or some things that do have a little bit of sugar, even though it's not thought of as a sugary thing?
I would say after the first couple of weeks, it would be okay to have more starchy vegetables like beets or sweet potatoes. I think it really depends on the person and what you feel like you're missing, if anything. It also depends on what kind of sugar person you are. Like I said, it's an avalanche food for a lot of people, and so any amount of sugar is just going to set them right off. But I think there are certainly sensible ways to re-add starchy vegetables back in without having them comprise a big component of your diet. Because we need carbohydrates for good brain function and for energy for our muscles, and so carbs in and of themselves are not bad. It's the refined sugar that is so inflammatory and avoidable a lot of the time.
All right, so Halloween's around the corner, And that's probably the start of the sugar season, with Halloween and Thanksgiving and the holidays. And so what's your advice for people to really kind of start to manage sugar? And part of this is getting like their partners and kids on board if they've got others in the house. So what's your recommendation?
It is possible to enjoy Halloween without eating candy. And so the first step in doing that is to figure out what it is you like about Halloween. So is it hanging out with cute kids? Is it getting together with friends? Is it making costumes? Because none of those things that I just mentioned inherently requires candy to be present, right? And so if you're wanting to change your habits around sugar, then you need to, first of all, think about why you want to do it. If you're going into this with, it seems like a good thing to do, that is not a powerful why, and you need a powerful why if you're going to make a change that's this big. And so when you find yourself reaching for, in my personal case, would be the Reese's Cups. It's like, wait, how does this really align with what I want to create for myself? And if you can stay focused and present, then it's a lot easier to make a good decision than if you just kind of go onto autopilot and reach into the plastic pumpkin and start grabbing stuff. Now, alternatively, if you're sort of into if you're well along the path of eliminating sugar and, you want to eat a piece of candy as long as it's not one of those things that kicks off a binge, then it's not going to undo all of the good that you've done. So this is another place where the 80-20 rule applies. It's like if you're eating well 80% of the time, then 20% of the time you could eat for joy or pleasure, as long as you're not doing it mindlessly. And so that means, no scarfing down the candy bar. Take a bite, really taste it, and stop as soon as a bite does not taste as good as that first one did. And this is really a practice to get into. This is not something that you can just, at 4:00 on Halloween afternoon, you decide you're going to try this. This is a practice you need to cultivate before you get to that point.
Kind of in closing, how do you, if you've got others in the house, have you seen your clients try to kind of change this even just beyond themselves? I can't imagine it's hard enough for one person, but how do they bring others along? Any advice there?
I ran across a Facebook post from a friend the other day that said her daughter went to a party and stuffed her face with cookies till she had a stomach ache. And they went home and the mom was asking her about it. And she's like, well, I feel like we don't ever have that kind of stuff in the house, so I have to eat as much as I can when I'm not here. And that was sort of a light bulb moment for the mom. But I think if you start early on and you get kids involved in doing the shopping and planning the meals and talking about why you're making the change that you're making, it's not like you're trying to be the anti-fun committee. But if you explain to your kids about the health issues, they may not care, but I bet they pick up enough of that to take that forward. And so, if they're not eating a lot of sugar at home, the likelihood is they're going to go out somewhere and hopefully not have the same experience that my friend's kid had, but that they take a bite or a drink of something that's really sugary and they go, ooh, that doesn't even taste good. Because once your taste buds become unaccustomed to sugar, when you start eating it, it is like, yuck, this is the worst thing ever. Because that changes too. Your taste buds completely change.
Yeah. Oh, I'm looking forward to that moment. Because, I know that the Reese's peanut butter cup thing, that first bite is awesome, but definitely can't look at another one after I've eaten the first, which is a huge change from where I used to be. So it works. Like what you're talking about is working. And your taste buds too change. So that's encouraging. Well, thank you again. This has been a great kind of look at something that is so pervasive in all of our diets. And we're about to, again, as I said, enter the sugar season. And your insights are always really, really great. So thanks again.
Well, good luck with your journey.
Thank you. I'll be checking in with you every now and again, letting you know how great I feel or not. Thank you, Dr. Anna.
It's good to talk to you. Thank you.
So what kind of quitter are you? Do you have to go cold turkey, or can you just cut back without binging? However you go about it, if you decide to kick your sugar habit, we'd love to hear how it's going for you. Let us know in the blog comments or on our Geneve Facebook page. You can get more information on quitting sugar on Dr. Garrett's website at dranngarrett.com. Next up, we talked to the co-owner and brewmaster at the Portsmouth Brewery about their unique new beer for women in menopause. Yep, you heard me right. Beer for women in menopause. And it's delicious. Come on back and hear all about it. I'll see you soon. Thanks for listening to the Geneve podcast series. We welcome your feedback at geneve.com. That's GENNEVE.com. You can follow us on Facebook and subscribe to us on iTunes or Stitcher, and you'll never miss an episode. The Geneve podcast series is produced by Shannon Perry, theme music by Smitty. And until next time, watch the Geneve website for new stories and offers all dedicated to women's midlife health.